It is a bogus landmark, but I'm going to mark the fact that my channel has just crossed its first 1,000 subscribers by choosing this fascinating excerpt from an interview with two British paleobiologists, Jan Jelizovich and Mark Williams, about Earth's biosphere. Before I do that, may I just point out that as a channel policy, I have never sought subscribers. I have never asked anyone to like or share either. So the 1,000 odd people who now subscribe deserve my special gratitude. Coming to our planet's biosphere, it's a thin skin of barely 20 kilometers within which everything we call life has existed for 3.5 billion years. Sentient life in all forms on this planet has throbbed within this thin strip. So, next time when you feel arrogant for no reason, remind yourself that it is barely 500 meters below the surface of Earth and 6 kilometers above it that has sustained sentient life. The biosphere is essentially a very thin skin in the context of Earth's overall size. You're talking maybe a few kilometers above the surface and about 4 kilometers in the ocean depth if you take the average depth. Or if you go to the deepest point, which is, I think, the Challenger Deep, about 10 kilometers or so. So it's a very thin layer. And yet, everything that has happened on this planet is within that thin strip. I'm quite fascinated by that view. Tell me a bit more about when you approached this book. I'm interested to know that.
Well, I think you're quite right. I mean, the scale of the biosphere. As I say, it's we think of the Earth as a planet and we see it and we see these pictures, but it is that terribly thin skin that is not simply living, but is controlling much that is non-living there. Perhaps even going as far as controlling the nature of mountain building and plate tectonics, the pattern of earthquakes and the pattern of volcanism on Earth, in that. And this scale of what's been called, the critical zone, I think is a really important jumping off point from that. So it's not and artists have tried to, find ways of, if you like, looking at the Earth inside out to try and bring us new perspectives, to break us out of our feeling of, if you like, of taking all of this for granted. It's a remarkable machine, and if you like, it's a paradox. The Earth is habitable because it has this, living skin, and without the living skin, it would not be habitable. So it's almost, if you like, a paradox that we have to try and get inside.
It's even more remarkable when you think that thin skin, as you said, Mayank, has managed to sustain itself for 4 billion years, perhaps 4 billion years, because that's the history of life on planet Earth. And during that interval of time, there have been huge climatic upheavals, major intervals of volcanic eruption, asteroid strikes, most recent really big one being 66 million years ago. And yet through all of that thin skin is able to maintain that habitable zone that Jan has been talking about. It's amazing and remarkable to think on that just how durable and resilient the biosphere is. And yet one species at present is really threatening that durability at a very serious level. That species, of course, being us.
Yeah. Let me flip it a bit. If a system relatively small like our planet can produce such a sophisticated biosphere, why is it not possible for the universe of this scale somewhere to have something similar?
Well, possible certainly, because the universe is enormous. When you think of how many stars there are in the galaxy, and then how many galaxies there are, and how many new galaxies have been found just by one photograph, of the James Webb Telescope. There clearly are the possibilities there. But if one takes, now it's quite a large sample, of star systems, and exoplanets, planets beyond Earth, which can be sensed well enough to have some idea, of how big they are, how hot they are, how they orbit around their star systems. And it's clear that most planets are either far too hot or too cold, or have these crazy orbits, around a much less, reliable sun. So there is something at least very rare going on here. And I guess one big question for the astronomers, with the James Webb, will be to see, just how rare is this kind of star system, because then we can begin to approach your question. Once we have this, then you can have that. But it is a kind of double rarity that has got to be fought through here.
But even if you accept that, and I agree with Jan, I agree with you, Mayank, also, I think there are planets out there with complex biospheres on them. But if you were thinking about per unit of space, then they will be incredibly rare. By some calculations that I've looked at, the nearest habitable planet might be 17,000 light years away. Well, that's not something that you're going to be able to, jump onto your spacecraft and visit in the near future. So again, it still brings back the centrality of the importance of these planets, if we believe that life is something very, very significant in our cosmos.